My name is Rob Daly. I am the executive director of the foundation that puts on Gales Creek Camp. So we're just really happy that you're all here. We do these monthly and just talk about issues that are affecting all of us as parents of kids with T1D, kids with diabetes, type 1 diabetes. My daughter is 17 now. She's had diabetes since she was 2. She goes to camp and she loves it. And she has a cell phone and she loves it, maybe too much. So this is a great topic. I'm going to introduce and pass it on to Kendra Lodewick, who is our host of this for the last several years and has really brought so much to it. And I just appreciate her being here, as well as our other guests who are here. And I'm not sure if they're all here, but I know that a couple of them are. So
Yes.
please take it away.
Okay, thanks. Hi, everyone. It's nice to see you. Again, my name's Kendra Lodewick, and I've seen many of you before, but just very briefly, our 3 kids all have type 1 diabetes, and we've been at it. Our oldest was the first to be diagnosed, and she was diagnosed when she was 5, and she's now 22. So that's the span, and then we've just added the depth with some new members in the tribe along the way. And I love these sessions because it's really great to have community as parents of kids with type 1 and on all sorts of different topics. And just talking with people who really get it is important. So tonight's session is really relevant. All of you either may be already experiencing some policy changes at your schools related to phone access, or maybe in the future. And I thought to start that maybe Lauren and Boo, or I don't know if I should call you Boo or David here, but that we could each, and the other guest that we're expecting is Amanda Bickford, who's a nurse in a school district, that we could each take a moment to introduce ourselves and give a little overview of kind of what's happening with this area and our own experience in schools, and then pass it on to Sol Joye, who's here from the Department of Education, who maybe you could give us a little bit of a higher level view of what's happening and what we might expect. And we may see some variation just among the group here that's talking. So I'll very briefly say that our youngest is a 9th grader, and this year, his high school invoked a no phone policy, and their policy is one like some of yours may also be, where the students have to lock their phones in yonder pouches, which are pouches that are sealed and locked, that when they enter the school building, they put them in. The yonder pouch gets locked, and then when they exit the building, they go through there's a mechanism that unlocks them. When this came into effect in the summer, we wrote the school and they immediately about how this was going to be in conflict with our son's 504 plan, and they had already developed a backup for the kids who had needed accommodations, and their backup was that our son puts his phone in a Velcro yonder pouch, so he gets to carry his phone with him in the yonder pouch. It makes a lot of noise if you open it up. It's a really noisy Velcro, so that's a deterrent from using the phone during the day. I still see all of his numbers throughout the day, so the yonder pouch doesn't block my ability to see his numbers. But I will say I'm not sure that he has his phone on silent because he's on a pump. But if someone was, for example, doing injections and had to put their phone away, I'm not sure if they would be able to hear the alarms through that. So that's a little bit of context on where we're at. And I would like to pass it on to Lauren, who maybe you can introduce yourself and a little bit of kind of where you're at in this scenario, and then we can go on to Boo after that.
Great. Thanks so much, Kendra. Thanks. Nice to meet all of you. I'm Lauren Kraemer. My son Perry, who's 11, was diagnosed 2.5 years ago at the age of 8. He's a now 2-time Gales Creek camper. And I will say that when he was first diagnosed, probably like all of you, there was just so much to learn and absorb. And we were a family up to that point that we're on the wait till 8th for cell phone plans, and we're going to delay that technology introduction as long as possible. And at the age of 8, we were then handing our son a cell phone so that we could be in tune with his numbers throughout the school day and throughout summer camps and all the things that he has since been able to participate in. So I have a foot in both of those worlds of being aware that we wanted to delay that technology, but also that it became an absolute necessity for his health and our peace of mind. And it really hasn't been a problem. He's been a great responsible user of that tool and technology at school, and we've been really clear with him that it is only for use with managing his type 1 diabetes. But last spring, we started hearing rumblings and murmurings in our school district about a total cell phone ban, and then started receiving newsletters from our local principal at the elementary level that all smartwatches and all cell phones were to be kept at home. And so we reached out to the principal and our team there, the nurses and teachers, just to remind them that Perry's 504 plan indicated that he was allowed to have those, and might they add just even a sentence of equity, creating that language of exception so that kids and parents wouldn't be kind of singling Perry out, or that he would have to out himself all the time to other adults in the building and explain and advocate for himself. And our district is now pursuing yonder pouches, but not until the high school level. So the policy still remains that for elementary and middle school, zero tolerance for phones. And we've just struggled a bit with trying to figure out how do we maintain our son's privacy, but also teach him to advocate. And so it was during the summer, probably a week or two before Perry was set to go to camp, that I reached out to Rob and just said, hey, can you guys think about working in some role playing or language? Because I feel like all our kids are going to start to be faced with this issue, like, hey, why do you have your phone out? And I wanted to help them create some language and some go-to responses. And so that's when Rob was like, how about you come on Hope-Mongering and we'll talk about this with the community. So that's what brings me here tonight. We're just, like all of you, concerned about what this will look like in the coming years, and Perry starts middle school next year, so it'll be a totally different ball game, different teachers, different movement throughout the building. So feeling a little nervous for that, but curious to hear about all of your experiences too. Thanks. That's all for me now.
Thanks. Boo, maybe you can tell us what it's like in your school or district right now.
Yeah, so my name is David Yabu, and some people call me Boo because that's who I was at camp for a bunch of years. I worked out at camp from 2009 until 2023 in various roles out there. It's my favorite place in the world. And then I am an educator, so I've been working in schools since I graduated college in 2011 and worked in a variety of different capacities, went back and became a licensed teacher. So I've worked in everything from a kindergarten classroom all the way up through high school seniors, senior English. And so currently I'm at a middle school where I've been for the last 10 years. In our school district, and our middle school specifically, we've adopted a phones are off and away during the day policy. They really like the catchy rhyme. So I think that's kind of how they came up with it. But students' phones are supposed to be in their lockers until the end of the school day, and then they can come out after the school. As someone who has a ton of experience working with T1D kids, I'm kind of like the go-to teacher for all T1D students. So if there's a T1D student at our school, they've probably gone through my class or a couple of my classes or all of my classes. I have a couple of students who are T1D that have been in my class even this year as we've kind of gone with this policy. And we're not into the yonder pouches yet. I know that looks a little different and that's complicated. My biggest thing that when I talk to parents, and oftentimes parents, when they find out that I understand T1D and they're really excited about that, my biggest thing is like, have your 504, know what that means. Here's how that looks. With my students in particular, before school starts, I kind of have a conversation with them. It's like, do you want me to are you on a pump? What's going on? you on a special signal with me to let me know you need to check your blood sugar, or you need to go get a snack. And that I think helps put parents at ease a lot. But then we kind of talk about what those skills look like for my students at our school, right? Like when they're in my PE class, they may not have pockets in their PE clothes. So when we're out running, I hold on to the cell phones on I like a clipboard or a pocket that I hold on to them, and then they just come and they pick them up from me. So um, it's, I think, kind of a pretty special, unique situation in that with my experience and where my school's at and all those things. But the thing I just always encourage parents to do is have that open early communication, and then include your kiddo in it, because um, Lauren was saying, is they're going to have conversations. They're going to have questions. Especially in middle school or elementary school, there's this concept of, justice with those kids of like, well, this is what's fair and unfair. And so I as a teacher could come down and say, well, this is the way it is, but it's way more powerful if students are able to kind of do that for themselves and with support, of course. So, I mean, I'm happy to answer kind of from a teacher's perspective any questions about things like that as we kind of go tonight. And I know that all of you are going to have a unique situation with all sorts of caveats and nuance. And I don't know that there's going to be 100% satisfaction with any of my answers that I give you, but I will do my best. The good thing is that we know that about parents and kids with T1D is they're super resilient, and they know how to roll with the punches a little bit and kind of ride those highs and lows out. So I'm here to answer any questions.
Thank you, David. I'll try to call you that now. Okay, Sol, maybe you can take a minute then. So we just gave kind of 3 examples at different schools and districts, and I'm wondering if you can tell us kind of from the state lens, this variation typical? What are you seeing? And is there anything that we as parents might expect for anything that's going to be sort of more consistent policy or guidance, or what to look forward to?
Sure. Yeah. Good evening, everybody. And thanks for asking me to be here tonight. Really excited to not only talk to you all a little bit about what's going on in the state and maybe beyond that a little bit, but also to me and to probably our team, what's way more important is actually listening to everybody here on this call and kind of listening, about what's actually going on in schools and on, kind of on the ground, as we would say. Working at a state agency, it's hard to not feel disconnected a lot of times from like the reality of what's happening in schools day in and day out. So I appreciate being here. So like Kendra said, my name is Sol Joye. I'm the program analyst for digital learning at the Oregon Department of Education. I work on a relatively small team that deals with lots of digital learning related types of things. I'll be upfront about it. Cell phones and mobile devices is not like normally within my wheelhouse too much. This kind of came onto our radar probably about 2 years ago, 1.5 years ago. And myself and a couple of other folks on our team really started to notice, not only in the state of Oregon, but also really nationally and actually globally, this kind of trend towards more of a restrictive environment. And so about this time last year was when we started to draft out what cell phone and mobile device guidance would look like for the state. So we did that, and that was released back in October of 2024. Let me put this in the chat. I'm hoping that link, it looks like it's an active link in the chat. So that short link goes to our guidance. So if you have not seen our cell phone and mobile device guidance yet, I highly suggest you go and look at that and read that. As most or all of you are probably really well aware, Oregon is a local control state. So, essentially in most things, we cannot really mandate anything as a state agency. So most of what I do and most of what our team does is offer guidance on things. And so I was the primary author of this guidance for cell phones and mobile devices, and I also work in online and remote learning, and we deal with all of that guidance. I was one of the primary authors on the AI guidance that was released about 1.5 years ago. So lots of things where we kind of offer kind of 2 things, like what kind of the best research is saying around a specific topic, what the national and global trends are on those topics, and then kind of what we would say is the, one of the, kind of one of the guidance or one of the different pathways that we would advise, districts and school leaders to kind of look at and take under advisement. And that's really about all of the power that we have. So with cell phones and mobile devices, kind of going from the whole entire world on down really quickly. Right now, it's about a third of the countries around the world. And this is not just like states or individual territories within a country, like the whole country has essentially banned or restricted, heavily restricted cell phones and other mobile devices in schools. And then you go and you look at, the United States as a country, and seems like every single day that goes by, more and more states are moving towards restrictions. I think California was the most recent, big state that has recently signed legislation. The governor just signed it a few months ago. That's basically moving towards complete bell to bell, morning bell to end of the day bell restrictions for cell phones and other mobile devices in schools. That in California takes place in 2026. And so within those confines, obviously there are tons of exceptions to that. And so our guidance, if you look at it, also regularly talks about those exceptions. And it's definitely not just, from like a 504 health perspective. There are also a lot of other IEP and a lot of other different exceptions also. And so one of the things that we are constantly trying to kind of get that messaging out is that not only are there really clear cut areas where there legally have to be exceptions, obviously, but one of the things that we're talking to a lot of districts about as often as we can is the idea that as these, as it seems like momentum is moving towards more restrictions, what we're trying to advise district and school leaders is to regularly talk to students, all staff members, not just teachers. And I was a teacher for a long, long time. So when I say all staff, I mean like classified staff, counselors, everybody. And we're also really talking about advising those leaders to talk to students as much as possible, to talk to families and caregivers, the whole school community, to really get a lot of input about what those policies may or may not look like and what they may or may not include as they move forward. And then also, most importantly, that it's not a one and done thing where they develop a policy, they implement the policy, and then that's it and they're done. What we're constantly talking to school leaders about is developing and implementing those policies, and then continually working to evaluate it and refine it and improve it. Getting as much input along the way as possible. And so, like a couple of the other folks talked about, we're definitely seeing more Oregon districts moving towards restrictions, whether it's, off and away for the day, or the yonder pouches, or some other different types of approaches. But we're definitely seeing that as a trend. And our guidance does lean towards restricted environment, particularly just around instructional time and classroom time. Um, there is just, to be just blunt about it, there is more and more really high quality research that, mobile devices and cell phones, but particularly social media, is really having a negative impact on students. And I can talk a lot more about that if you want. Our guidance goes into that a lot more. But we're really just trying to also convey the message that if and when schools and school districts are moving towards restrictions, that it is not about a punitive measure that is to like punish students or take this thing away from them. We understand how important a lot of these devices are to students. What we're really trying to convey is the message that what these restrictions should look like and feel like, and the messaging around it is that we're trying to help create environments and classroom environments and learning environments that are really productive and allow students to learn as much as they can and to achieve as much as they can. And that, whether it's academics and grades or just their social emotional health and their well-being, and all of that kind of tied into one.
Mhm.
So there's House Bill 2251 and House Bill 3458. They're separate. They're very much different bills if you get a chance to look at them. And maybe some of the legislators are in districts that you live in. But both of them are restrictions essentially. 2251 would be kind of an outright ban, bell to bell, and even beyond that. It even talks about like bus stops and some other kind of odd things that are not really within the realm of a district to try to enforce. Um, and then 3458 would actually take local control of district policy around cell phones and mobile devices. It would take it away from districts. And it would actually put it on Oregon Department of Education to come up with a spectrum of policies from least restrictive to most restrictive. And that districts would be required to pick one of those policies to kind
Hmm.
of adopt and implement. And so that's kind of where we're at right now.
Hmm.
ODE doesn't really have a say in those matters. They, the legislators, they send the bills to us, and we can kind of give some fiscal impact and some other kind of analyses around those, but we don't ever say yes, this is good, or no, this is bad, or anything like
Mhm.
that. We just kind of let that play out, and then we do what the laws basically require us to do. So if you have an interest in either one of those, I would say definitely take a look at them and contact your local legislators if you want to have anything to say about those. So,
Thank you, Saul. Those are really great resources for us to dig into and investigate a little further. So really
yeah.
appreciate you sharing those in the chat. One of the things that I'm hearing from both David and Lauren's comments and Saul's comments as well is the importance of well, differentiating these policies, and one of the components of that is students needing to advocate for themselves for this. And I'm wondering I love Lauren's perspective and other parents' perspective on this too. In some ways, to me, this doesn't feel that different than kind of the advocacy that our kids have to do for themselves all the time, in the sense of, I think of like when they're having a snacks and you're not allowed to have snacks in the classroom, and they have to have a snack because they have a low. And it's the same thing at a smaller scale, where the kids are like, why do they get to eat when we can't eat? And it's to me, it seems like an analogous situation. So the kinds of advocacy, it would seem to me that the kinds of advocacy and I know, Lauren, you mentioned privacy issues would be at play. Well, I know as well. I know for us, we've always been very like from the start, our kids have kind of given presentation to their classes at their starter school. They talk to all of their teachers, and so it's not. In some ways, I think that may make it easier, and not all kids may do that or feel comfortable with that, because it's everyone kind of knows that they have type 1, and it's easy for them to advocate for themselves among their peers or among their teachers. But I can see if your student is not comfortable with that, that may make it more challenging. So would love to hear from other parents or other of our speakers today about how that varies, and does this look different than sort of like the typical kind of advocacy that kids with type 1 have to do for themselves?
I think I would just add, we might get interrupted by my T1D coming home from basketball practice, that they, at least our experience with Perry's, he's also done presentations like that for his classes in 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade. I think sometimes though, kids, just like adults, have their days when they're like, I don't want to explain this anymore, or I want to be unique on my own terms and not called out or vilified, or have to explain this for the 120th time to a sub that's on my case. So I think those are some of the things we were picking up on as parents, and like parents do, wanting to protect them from being singled out, but also give them that language when they are being asked by a sub, hey, you're not supposed to have your phone, why is that out right now? And a lot of times so far in Perry's case, it's been his peers that kind of jump in and stick up for him, which is awesome. Like I said, I don't know what that'll look like in middle school. He'll be with a whole lot more students and new kids and new teachers that don't know him as well. But I hear that, Kendra. I think it is a similar level of advocacy. I think it's also just like, how do you handle it on the bad days too, when you've just had enough? But
Yeah, for sure. I would love how other families input on that, or David, if you have any thoughts on that from the school side of it.
I think, one of the coolest things that took me a while to kind of understand, just in my experience. One of my really good friends who's T1D kind of was like, you don't get to tell me how I feel about my diabetes. And I was like, yeah, you're totally right. And so I think that's the other thing to consider because, like as an educator, like, a student comes into my PE class, I don't get to decide how they feel about PE. I get to like try and help them understand it and learn to love parts of it. And I think that's kind of the same thing with diabetes. Like you may have a student that is totally comfortable going up and explaining their pump and all of those things. And you may have a student that's like, I want to keep it totally secret. I don't want anybody to know right now. Um, One of the things, like this is kind of, I don't know, like not that these events every Hope-Mongering every month is a commercial for camp, but I can't stress enough the importance of summer camp in the lives of young people in general, and then also our T1D community is because they have those moments where they can kind of explore that with other people that are going through the same thing. Um, when I think about students at our school, and especially in that middle school time period, um, don't worry, Lauren, middle school is super easy. All the kids, they thrive there. That's it. But like I think where they find the most success is where they get to take ownership of something. Now that ownership may be, I don't want to tell people. That ownership may be, I want to tell everyone. But giving them some of that control and then as parents supporting whatever that is and working to find a way to make that work. I think you look with school districts and with teachers and different things like that. um, Teachers are used to differentiating what we do in the classroom for different students. Like that's the expectation as a teacher and an educator. So when we look at all the aspects of what that student is, and just, T1D is one aspect of your student, I think that's something to consider, that they will try and do whatever they can to help your student be successful. That being said, sometimes as educators, we also need help to do that. So, if your student doesn't want to be part of that conversation, if they say, Mom, Dad, Grandma, Grandpa, let's figure out a plan and you just tell me what I have to do, great. But I think the biggest thing is just early, often communication and education with the staff. When we went to our cell phone ban in our school, those questions came up right away. And for us, it seemed pretty logical that we were just, yeah, obviously there's exceptions. I don't think there are very many situations where there aren't exceptions to a rule. And so, we all get the 504 plans at the beginning of every year. Anytime a student comes into our class, we read them, we look at them, and we know. And so for my students, it was, yep, they're going to have their cell phones. And especially at the middle school age, that was the big conversation of how do we make sure that you're using it appropriately? Here's how you build trust with your teachers. Here's how you build trust with the hall monitor, the principal, um, throughout that. And kind of, it's the same thing. It's like, it just is a tool that you're using to manage your diabetes, and that helps you. And so because of that, like we need to learn to use it that way. I've been really lucky with my T1D students. None of them are trying to open up social media instead of check their blood sugar during my class. Um, the unfortunate reality is some of your kids are going to do that because they're kids, and that's just kind of how it works sometimes. So, that's, I hate to break it to you, but sometimes parenting conversations aren't going to have easy answers with them, but working with them to kind of understand those things.
I think it's helpful to me. I think it's really useful to just the reminders that each kid is different and how they want to approach it. And the same kid is different and how they want to approach it at different times of the year, at different times of the day. And so having sort of different kind of different moves in play, depending on, to meet them where they're at and to make sure that, all the everyone's on the same page is important. So that, I think that's really helpful. Other feedback or questions? Yeah.
I was just wondering how all of this meshes with the Americans with Disability Act compliance for schools. I work for a private college, and ADA compliance comes up all the time in similar sort of discussions, and I imagine this is a factor as well.
Yeah, I mean, I'm going to defer to David or to Sol on this, and my assumption would be, that Section 504 is written into law, and so those accommodations are the right. So I can't imagine that, but that's where my knowledge stops. So I should pass it along to some of our experts here to weigh in on that.
I would chime in. I can chime in really quickly. Yeah, there's a whole host. I mean, there are many, 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 federal laws and sets of laws like ADA and other ones, with like COPA and FERPA and SIPA and a lot of other like privacy um, rules and regulations that school districts have to abide by. The tough thing again is that it doesn't mean that they always do in every single case, or even if a policy does in the actual language of it, it doesn't mean that every teacher is going to inherently do that to follow that every single time. So, I think that's one of the many reasons why it's really important as like parents, families, caregivers, and just kind of the bigger, broader school community to really try to have like a regular kind of ongoing relationship with teachers and with school leaders and vice versa too. We're always talking about to school leaders and teachers that they need to have really good ongoing relationships with every person in that school community, just to make sure that as often as possible, all of those rules and regulations are being followed. And so, like David was talking about, it's not easy to be, to follow that perfectly every time. Just like it's not easy for a student to follow all of the rules, perfectly every time. But it's just kind of having that ongoing relationship. And so I think it's just really important to kind of have kind of a regular, ongoing professional relationship with as many of those people as you can.
To kind of add on to that, like as a teacher, as an educator in schools, we become really aware when one of the big rules is being broken. The all staff emails that come out and say, hey, remember, this is what an IEP looks like. This is what a 504 looks like. Here's what they do. Um, and I think it's way easier as a teacher to not hear you've been doing something bad versus hey, we're checking in and making sure, do that like little everyday maintenance, not everyday maintenance, or well, if you need everyday maintenance, do the everyday maintenance with your teachers, but the maintenance along the way so that you don't have to do a big repair at the end. I'm a big advocate of that. And I think that's one of those things, when your student comes home and says, I had this issue in school today, take care of that as a small issue before it becomes a big issue. And a lot of times, it's, oh, the teacher just, it slipped their mind. We just started a new semester and I have, 200 totally new students that I don't know their names, and I'm catching up on 504s and all of those things. And if I'm doing my absolute best, I'm caught up by now. But again, just like students aren't perfect, educators sometimes have a little bit of a learning curve as well.
From my point of view, when I meet a lot of parents and different places in their journey of raising a kid with diabetes, and I hear really variable stories about how things go. Just from like, my kid was diagnosed and we needed to get this 504 in place. We needed to explain how they need snacks in the classroom if they're little kids or whatever. And sometimes I'm amazed that it sounds like schools have never heard of diabetes. They've never heard of 504. Like, I'm just like sometimes a little bit horrified at how, I mean, horrified's not the fair word to say, but I'm surprised at how varied the experiences of people can be. Because for some people are like, oh, it was so easy. When I called the school and they took care of everything and it was no big deal. So, and I've heard this about the cell phone thing too, how it's implementation has been rockier in some places, and parents or teachers are kind of fighting back a little bit. My own daughter's experience in her high school has been that she's been confronted with her phone in the hallway. Like sometimes she has to leave the classroom to go to get juice or whatever, and she gets confronted, and it really annoys her. She's like, they have no right to talk to me. I'm like, well, they do have a right to talk to her, but she doesn't like it that she has to explain to every single person she walks by what is going on. And it is a high school, and there's like 1,500 students, and there's, you know, hundreds of teachers, or I don't know how many teachers, but there's a lot, and they don't all know her, and you know, they never will. Like in elementary school, like I think Lauren was saying, like everybody knows your kid basically, because your kid is one kid with diabetes, and she's gone to every anyway. Um, this mom wrote into us about this, who couldn't be here, and was kind of recounting a similar story, and she said that the school adopted this laminated hall pass for kids who needed to use their device, but like basically the type 1 kids, and it's like this brightly colored little, I don't know, card. I don't know what it says on it, but I don't think it says, you know, I have diabetes and that means my pancreas doesn't work and that means blah blah. I think it just says like I'm allowed to use my phone. Like this is a medical exemption and I get to use it. So all he's got to do is kind of wave it, and whether the teacher knows him or not, they know that that is a symbol of like, oh, you're cleared to do that. I'm sure it's not hard to make I just thought, oh, my kid would probably be like, we can manufacture those. Laminator, right? I don't know. Like she's better than that, but you know, I'm sure that there's really smart kids out there. But I just, you know, it strikes me that, as Kendra was saying, it's so varied at the experiences of implementation. And so when Sol, you said that there may be like a uniform implementation coming from the state. That's kind of intriguing. Are there other examples of that where I mean, I guess maybe in nutrition or something where the Department of Education basically mandates certain rules within schools?
Yeah, I mean, there are, nutrition is one of them. Certainly, there are things around attendance or lack thereof, which obviously is a huge problem in Oregon. When you get into upper grades with like high school and you get into things like credits and content areas, now there's a lot of different requirements that ODE does or is able to kind of keep an eye on or regulate, but almost all of those come through Oregon revised statutes and directly from legislation. So it's not that Oregon Department of Ed decided, oh, here's the rules that we do get to enforce. It's essentially that the legislature decides what those are, and then we kind of try to figure out the best ways to go about doing that, which can have varying levels of success depending on it. But this may just be one of the new ones that we've got to try to figure out what does that look like to actually help enforce. I don't even like that using that word enforce, but how do we help implement that new, state legislation?
I'm wondering, Lauren, if you want to talk any more about your experience in kind of navigating this with your district and what kind of like feedback or response you got and how that has played out in case other families are kind of starting those conversations or experiencing similar dynamics in their districts.
Yeah, I mean, our experience was characterized really well by Rob. Our kiddo was the first T1D in the school for I don't know how long. So we really felt like we had to pave the way and explain it at a very basic level to lots of people. And we're in a small district out in Hood River County that when Perry was first diagnosed was sharing one nurse across all of the schools. So she had a patient panel of 4,000 kids, and it was a lot of work he was a kind of medically fragile kid for the first few months as we figured out how to reintegrate him into the school day and what that would look like. We chatted a bit this afternoon, Rob, Kendra, and I was just, my heart goes out to new families too, who are getting diagnosed, this month or last month, and how you wrap your head around all the things you need to learn and absorb. And I was thinking, is that something that can start to gently get covered in the new parent education stuff, even at the hospital? Hey, you're going to need a 504 plan and you're going to need to indicate a cell phone is required in that. There's some new legislation happening. when these conversations started happening in our area, I reached out to the other local T1D families that I knew. A lot of them have their kids now in the middle school and high school. We've got the youngest one in the area that we know of. And we asked the district to have a focus group with us. And so they met with 5 moms of T1Ds in Hood River County schools, and we told them our concerns and were able to share some of what we've been talking about tonight around privacy and what it would look like if we moved to the yonder pouches. And I think it was helpful for them to hear, because I really don't think that they were approaching it with that equity lens, and had a lot of learning to do. There was kind of just some misinformation around, well, do they have to have a phone? Couldn't they do it in a different way? And T1Ds haven't always had phones, so couldn't they go back to the time before phones? And we're like, we're not doing that. That's a non-starter for us. So yeah, I think some of that was kind of like, okay, we're going to explain how a pancreas works, and then we're going to explain what happens when it stops working and why these phones are really important. And so I appreciate so much, Sol, your comments of like wanting to listen and hear those perspectives as you form policies or attempt to implement them. And I think we really had to push for that in our area, just to be heard and make sure that there wasn't this sweeping policy passed without any conversations with families who would be deeply impacted by that.
But I am glad though that that they actually did have that listening session with you and the other parents and caregivers, and did actually like genuinely, hopefully genuinely had an interest in listening to all of your input. That's kind of exactly what we would love to just regularly see and hear about. It'd be nice to hear that they were much more proactive and reached out to you to begin with, but we'll take either whatever we can get, I guess.
Other experiences or questions or concerns that other families have, or either experiencing this or kind of anticipating this?
Yeah, we were, I'm in the Portland Public School District, and we talked to the principal. She said we had to have a meeting, and we talked with her, and they were doing the yonder pouches, and they were kind of a starter sample, one of the first schools to do it, and the yonder pouches are huge. My son, he couldn't put it in his pocket. He couldn't feel that when his alarms were going off. And then it's Velcro and it's very loud. And we told them all this, that this is, privacy, and he has to have it, medical device. And they were like, no, he has to have it in the yonder pouch. And basically, I think my son just sneaks around with the phone. I mean, he's not using it for other purposes, but yeah. And so it hasn't been a very positive experience.
I appreciate that the comments in the Dr. Boss comment about making sure that it's in the school orders, and I think that's maybe where you're going with it, but allow for cell phones, and maybe allow for unencumbered access to cell phones. So yonder pouch wouldn't be a barrier, which it's clear that it's not working for some. Like I said, our son is using his, but he wears a pump, so he gets his alarms through the pump anyway, and we can still see his numbers with his phone in the yonder patch. That won't work for everyone. So it seems like, to the points in the comment, making sure that the doctor's orders include unencumbered access, so that would kind of negate discussion or debate around that, could be useful.
Can I just ask a question or two really quickly, Kendra? Is that okay? Kind
Yeah.
of related to those issues.
Yeah.
So, and this is just for my own knowledge, so I apologize. I don't have the depth of knowledge about this. So, okay, so the cell phone is like the primary device where the apps are on to notify not only the student, but also parents, family, caregivers. So, and again, I'm asking this, I don't want to infer that a third device would be like mandatory, but I'm just curious. So like on the cell phone apps, are there some possibility of having the device go to the phone and like a smartwatch or some sort of other device other than a phone? Is that like a common?
You can use a smartwatch, but they're banned too.
Yeah, no, for sure. Yeah, I get that for sure. I just was curious, just for my own knowledge, because
Can I? Yeah, I'll
Yeah.
jump in here and make a few comments on that. And this is where the technology is going. All of the pump companies have developed technology where the cell phone basically operates the pump.
Mm,
And so if a kid needs to make it's not just notifying what the blood sugar is, but if he needs to bolus for a meal,
Mhm.
he's got to do it through his cell phone. The
so
pumps
sorry, will you
originally,
what so I'm sorry.
sorry,
You did, Bruce, I'm sorry. You just used a word that I didn't know. I missed it. You said to bolus?
yeah, sorry, I lapsed. I'm a diabetes physician and,
Okay.
and I
Sorry.
lapsed.
Well,
Yeah,
again,
it's
I apologize for with my lack of depth of knowledge
no,
on this topic. So yeah.
no, it's easy for me to lapse into diabetes talk. So the term bolus basically means giving an extra bolus of insulin to accompany a meal.
Okay.
Um, the pump supplies a basal rate in the background 24/7. So the kid needs to be able to access and make sure occasionally if that pump is working, because that's all on the cell phone now,
Yeah.
and
Okay.
then to be able to put an extra dose in during meals. And sometimes in between also. I mean, but we don't have to go into that into too much
Sure.
detail.
Okay.
But basically that is the controller of the pump. Pumps used to be kind of self-contained outside of the cell phone technology, but they've all now embraced cell phone technology, and some of them are exclusively cell phone technology that are coming up.
Okay. So that's
Uh,
helpful for me. I'll be really honest with you. I guess my understanding was that the devices were only kind of unidirectionally sending information to the
no,
phone or just out there so that other people could get it, but it wasn't like a two-way
Depends
connection.
on the pump, depends on the pump.
Okay.
But yeah,
But the
certainly there's
two-way,
some,
but the phone controlling and helping the pump back and forth sounds like that's somewhat common.
Or
yeah,
having a
there are
second device that looks like a phone that controls the pump too.
Okay. Okay.
This is
right,
great
right.
experience, yes.
So many of the pumps do have what they call a PDM that can operate the pump that is not a cell phone. And that is an option, although it's becoming less of an option. Um, the pump companies are kind of getting away from that because everybody has a cell phone.
Right.
And some families just don't have a PDM with them. All of their stuff is on a cell phone, which of course creates the problems that now the kid, like we're talking about, the kid has a cell phone to do something else with it that's not as conducive to learning. Kids are
Sure.
kids, like David keeps saying, sometimes they'll do that. But they do need to have that pump to operate, or do need to have the cell phone to operate the pump.
like, that's not universal, but it's common and increasingly
Yeah.
common because some pumps are, if you have full pump functionality using just your pump, but that is not the case for all pumps. And it also depends on the kid's preference. Some kids prefer to use their phones to give themselves their insulin boluses, et cetera. So it varies, but you certainly couldn't assume that every student would be able to use their pump without access to their phone, even though some of them could.
Yeah. Okay.
That's correct. The technology is going to the direction of increasingly cell phone activated, but there are pumps that you can do just directly with the pump itself.
Or this is
Unless there's a problem.
Yeah.
You know, and then if there's a problem and you have to change the set and change the pump device and stuff, you got to have this access to the cell phone to do that.
Yeah, or our son has a PDM that is based on a cell phone. So he has a cell phone for his sensor, but he also has a cell phone, or essentially a cell phone, for his pump. And we've thought about moving him to entirely on the single cell phone. But honestly, I worry that then if that cell phone goes dead for some reason, then we are SOL. So I kept him on 2 for the time being. but he has to carry 2 of them with him, and he has a little fanny pack that he puts them in and carries them with him everywhere. But even so, if a teacher doesn't know, this would look very much like a cell phone to the uneducated eye.
Sure.
So he would still get the
Right.
same problem.
And actually, therein lies some of the problems that some of my families have. Now they have 2 devices,
Mhm.
and they're twice as likely to lose one of them.
Right.
And so a lot of them want to get it consolidated onto one. And, you know, if you've got a CGM, and you want that to communicate to the cloud, that's a cell phone, not a PDM and a cell phone. But again, I think the emphasis here, and we've heard this, a lot of this is family preference, but it's the technology is very cell dependent now, most of it.
I do want to be conscious of the time. I know it's 8 o'clock now, and we can stay on. I'm not sure if our panelists can stay on any longer, but are there any other families that want to either share their experiences or have questions or comments they want to share with the group?
The cell phone is necessary for anything. How do I say this? If the school is offering a snack,
Yeah.
right, and we don't know how many carbs because we need a device in order to put in the carbs to give him a bolus, my son will use his phone to take a picture and send it to us in order for us to look up the numbers. He's 9, by the way, so he cannot do this on his own. And so, you know, it's one of those, the additional features help us manage from afar his diabetes. So my experience for working with the college, dealing with ADA and FERPA and HIPAA rules and all of this stuff is that, you know, anything that interferes with our child's ability to be educated, it becomes covered under those sort of rules. And so, you know, so when I hear about people, you know, having the flat bands and not being very compliant, I'm like, in my work, I think, well, that just puts my school under ADA violation, which could become millions of dollars worth of fines and legal overhead. That is something that any school should never want to have to deal with. And, you know, so the idea of having that ban and thinking that they're being accommodating it seemed to me ridiculous, considering that I'm in a private school and we're tiptoeing, and I deal with websites of making sure an image is, you know, covered so that a reader for the blind gets things, because we don't want to have that. Can cost the school a lot of money, and for a public school district to take on that sort of liability, to me, is kind of astounding. But
sure.
it's something to consider.
Right,
Sol,
and Eric, I'm going to add to that a little bit, because a few years back, we could have easily argued that shots and pumps, you can get the same level of care. Now with the new auto pumps, where the continuous glucose monitor, and this is for Sol, continuous glucose monitor informs the pump on how to manage that blood sugar. We've taken a logarithmic step down, you know, in A1Cs and control. It's not equivalent. So I, as a physician, if I had a school district that was saying you can't have a pump that operates that, you can't have a cell phone that operates that pump, I would be right behind you and saying, doctor's orders, they need to have a device that operates the pumps, or you're interfering with that child's healthcare. So yes, I think it would be a violation of the Disabilities Act, and I would be willing to testify to that. So
one thing I want to point out, and I think Dr. Boston covered it as he was talking about how rapidly technology is changing in the world of type 1 diabetes. Compared to 5 years ago, 2 years ago, 10 years ago, a decade ago, it's vastly different. So I also want to remind you that up until however many years ago, the public education system still had a ton of archaic things embedded in it that we're trying to change. And so as we go through, I think the best course of action is talk to your doctors, talk to your endos, and have them put in those supports for you, because ultimately, there's a lot of things about the public education system that I would love to, snap my fingers and change overnight. And it is a long process. And we want to make sure that we're working together for that. And one of the easiest things to do is just say doctor's note. um, that's the difference of, hey, I can't run my laps in PE today, doctor's note, or let's have that 504 meeting and adjust because this isn't working for us. And your school and your educators in your child's life, their number one priority is always going to be the safety of your child. They may not understand what's going on, maybe putting that at risk a little bit, but bringing in your physicians to help. And hopefully, as this continues to evolve and as technology gets better and all of these things, like those changes can come. But just kind of realize too that there's a lot of things that have to take place for big overarching changes to happen in schools. And in general, leadership at schools, the whole idea when they make policies like this is just like Saul said, is you make a policy, you continue to refine, you continue to adjust to the needs of the students, and that's kind of our goal ultimately in education.
You have to go. I've got to pick up my youngest kiddo, unfortunately, but
Yeah.
I really appreciate everybody's time and input, and thank you so much for Rob for reaching out and allowing us to hang out tonight and learn a lot from all of you. So thank
We
you.
really appreciate you being here. You added so much to this conversation. I really appreciate it. And you are totally welcome to come visit us at Gales Creek Camp, just outside of Forest Grove. And you will learn in
I
half
used to
a
teach
day.
in Forest Grove. Yeah, it sounds great.
You will learn in half a day everything you need to know about how kids manage diabetes. It's amazing, and it's a really awesome place. So come out, have lunch with us, and you see if you can get it. Get your office to allow you to do a field trip and come.
That'd be
hang out.
amazing. I will definitely
Great.
follow up on that.
So,
I appreciate it.
Yes,
yeah,
thank
I'll
you for
follow up.
being here.
Thank you.
All right. Thanks,
Thank
everybody.
you.
Thank
All
you,
right.
Lauren.
Okay.
Thank you, David. Thanks to all the families who came here tonight and Dr. Boston and added so much to this. We're going to record it. We already recorded it. We're going to post it in a little while. It'll help other families. Is that Perry back in there? Yeah. Hey, buddy. Anyway, thanks, everybody. I really appreciate that. And don't forget to sign up for camp. It's going to be a great summer.